All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. We're going to unpack the tension, the suspects, and the absolutely legendary timeline of the most infamous unsolved heist in American history. I mean, we are looking at a story that has completely captivated amateur sleuths and professional investigators alike for over half a century. It's this wild tale of audacity, meticulous planning, and a disappearance so complete it honestly feels like something ripped straight out of a Hollywood script.
So how exactly does a man hijack a commercial airliner, parachute into the freezing night with $200,000, and just vanish without a trace? We're starting right in the thick of it today to figure out how one guy pulled off this seemingly impossible mid-air escape that literally baffled the FBI for 45 years. Seriously, think about it. How do you jump out of a jetliner in the pitch black of a November night, clutching a fortune in extorted cash, and disappear? To really understand the sheer scale of this mystery, we've got to go back to the very beginning, to a day that started out like any other in the Pacific Northwest.
Part 1. Flight 305's Polite Hijacker, a bourbon, a note, and a bomb.
Okay, picture this. It's November 24th, 1971, aboard a totally routine 30-minute Northwest Orient flight from Portland to Seattle. There were just 37 passengers on this Boeing 727, all just getting ready for the Thanksgiving holiday. And here is where we get this incredibly bizarre juxtaposition. A smartly dressed man in seat 18E, traveling under the name Dan Cooper, which, by the way, the media later mistakenly reported as D.B. Cooper, calmly orders a bourbon and soda. Normal enough, right? But then he hands a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. Assuming it was just some guy giving her his phone number, she actually ignored it at first. But the man leaned in and insisted she look. It read, "Miss, I have a bomb in my briefcase, and I want you to sit by me."
You know, it's easy to get lost in the legend, but this was a terrifying reality for 22-year-old Tina Mucklow. She was actually shown the inside of that briefcase, full of dynamite, wires, and a battery. It really grounds this whole historical event in real, human trauma. Tina was the newest crew member, yet she was instantly thrust onto the front lines of a literal life-or-death scenario. She had to sit right next to the hijacker. She even lit his cigarette, doing everything she could to keep him remarkably calm while secretly coordinating with the flight deck.
Moving on to Part 2, Ransom, Parachutes, and Delays, circling Seattle.
So, as the plane is just circling and circling outside Seattle, the tension inside that cabin is skyrocketing, while authorities on the ground are scrambling to meet a staggering demand, $200,000. To put that into perspective, that's worth about $1.4 million today. He also demanded 4 parachutes. Meanwhile, the passengers are completely in the dark about the bomb. They were just told a minor technical issue was delaying their landing. And asking for 4 parachutes, that was honestly a masterstroke. It forced the authorities to give him fully functional gear, because they had to assume he might take members of the flight crew out of the plane with him. Tracing this rapid escalation, as the afternoon wore on, Tina heroically ran back and forth to collect the cash and the parachutes, all while shielding the passengers from these insane stakes. When they finally touched down in Seattle, the passengers were let go, completely oblivious to the danger they had just been in. Crazy, right? But the ordeal for Tina and the flight crew was far from over. Cooper inspected the money, fashioned this makeshift bag out of one of the parachutes, and got ready for the next phase of his incredibly audacious plan.
All right, Part 3. The mid-air escape into the freezing night.
So, they depart Seattle with only Cooper, Tina, and the flight crew on board. Now, they did negotiate a refueling stop in Reno, Nevada, since the 727 couldn't actually make it to his original requested destination of Mexico City under his conditions. And man, those conditions were something else. For the getaway, Cooper demanded incredibly specific and frankly, technically dangerous flight instructions. He wanted the plane flying low and slow. We're talking under 10,000 feet and no faster than 150 knots, with the cabin completely unpressurized. Actually, get this. He initially wanted the plane to take off with the rear stairs already deployed. The crew somehow managed to talk him out of that, so they took off with the door closed. But Cooper soon made his move. He sent Tina up to the cockpit, telling her to close the curtain and absolutely not return.
Then the absolute climax hits. The aircraft suddenly pitches violently upwards, and a flashing warning light in the cockpit alerts the crew that the rear stairs have been lowered. Cooper had vanished into the pitch-black night over the Portland suburbs. By the time the plane finally landed in Reno, with the stairs literally still dragging on the tarmac, the cabin was completely empty. The money, the bomb, and D.B. Cooper were just gone.
Which brings us to Part 4. Suspect, Richard McCoy Jr., the copycat or the real deal? During the decades-long manhunt that followed,
the FBI investigated roughly 800 people. But Richard McCoy Jr., he always stood out. In April 1972, McCoy executed a chillingly similar copycat heist just months after Cooper. He was a military helicopter pilot who had served in Vietnam. He jumped over Utah with $500,000, got caught, was sentenced to 45 years, and was later killed by the FBI after a prison escape. But here's the really fascinating part. Recently, his children claim to have found the actual 1 in a billion parachute hidden away in their mother's shed. Independent investigators are actually suggesting the FBI is looking into this to see if they can finally get a DNA match to the Cooper hijacking. No way, right?
Part 5. Suspect. Sheridan Peterson, the smoke jumper.
But hold on, because McCoy wasn't the only prime suspect. Let's talk about Sheridan Peterson, a guy who checked almost every single box the FBI was looking for. His profile is just mind-blowing. He was the exact right age, 44 at the time. He had inside knowledge of Boeing aircraft because he actually worked there as a technical editor. Plus, he possessed elite smoke jumping skills, meaning he was a firefighter skydiver who absolutely knew how to parachute into rough terrain. And perhaps most incredibly of all, he was literally photographed simulating skydiving wearing a formal suit and tie for Boeing. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. The FBI actually brought him in for an interview and took a DNA sample, though he was never arrested and always claimed he was over in Nepal at the time of the heist. So when we stack up the circumstantial evidence of McCoy against Peterson, it really lets you weigh the facts and play armchair detective for a minute. On one hand, you've got a proven hijacker with a matching MO and a family claiming to have the physical parachute evidence. On the other hand, you have a Boeing insider with extreme, specialized skydiving experience who practically mirrors that iconic FBI sketch. Both of these guys present incredibly compelling yet entirely circumstantial cases. All right, part 6. An unsolvable 50-year mystery, the cold case. Despite all these incredible leads, the massive federal investigation ultimately hit a massive wall. No body was ever found, no parachute was ever definitively linked to the jump during the active investigation. The FBI spent a staggering 45 years actively investigating this case. Out of hundreds of suspects, the only physical evidence that ever surfaced after the jump was a measly $5,800 of the ransom money, which was found buried on the banks of the Columbia River near Vancouver, Washington in 1980. So, concluding that the resources were just better spent elsewhere, the FBI officially closed the active investigation in 2016.
So, we end this explainer with the ultimate question. Did he beat the odds? Did he survive that freezing rain and treacherous terrain to just live out his days in hiding? Or is the legend of D.B. Cooper, along with his briefcase and his parachute, forever lost to the night? The final piece of this giant puzzle